I'm Amanda Taylor. I'm a performer both on and offline and a writer with 2 writing degrees. Almost. I'm a passionate storyteller, and analysis is probably my top hobby. So if you're interested in some of my thoughts and recommendations, like, subscribe, and most importantly, share. Today we're going to be talking about 5 of my favorite books that I've read in my MFA program at Bennington College, where I am learning all about the magic of creative writing, specifically fiction. So I've been reading a mix of fiction and nonfiction, and that's what you'll see here in this pile. Some of these are maybe things that other people have told you to read, but some of them might be dark horse candidates that you weren't sure about, and I'm here to tell you that they're well worth your time. Okay, so my first recommendation is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos. This is a book that you've probably heard of, but you probably associate it with Marilyn Monroe and, I don't know, pink dress and musical numbers. This is not that. It is the same thing that the musical is based on, but the writing is really snappy. It's like a Gilmore Girls vibe, if that's something that you're into, and I thought it would be fun to read something from the 1920s as we entered into 2020, and I was absolutely not disappointed. A gentleman friend and I were dining at the Ritz last evening, and he said that if I took a pencil and a paper and put down all of my thoughts, it would make a book. This almost made me smile, as what it would really make would be a whole row of encyclopedias. I mean, I seem to be thinking practically all of the time. I mean, it is my favorite recreation, and sometimes I sit for hours and do not seem to do anything else but think. So this gentleman said a girl with brains ought to do something else with them besides think. And he said he ought to know brains when he sees them, because he's in the Senate and spends quite a good deal of time in Washington, D.C. And when he comes into contact with brains, he always notices it. My second recommendation is Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. I saw her read from this at Bennington, and it was absolutely fantastic. The whole thing is just chock full of witty and amazing observations. It's really funny, and also you will read it and be like, wow, that's me, and or that's so true. One of my particular favorites in this book is called Pure Heroines, and she talks about the fact that in literature written for women, a lot of the best female characters are very young, and then they get into their teenhood and their adulthood, and things become tragic and sort of morose. And so we all sort of hang on to these like characters that we read as kids. So this is a great observation. None of them are caricatures of goodness. Anne is ridiculous, Jo clumsy and obstinate, Anastasia dorky, Betsy flighty, Harriet unmodulated, Laura undisciplined. They have ordinary longings to be pretty and well-liked, but their self-interest doesn't turn on them. They live in the world as the people they are. Recommendation number 3. This book is so mind-blowing. It's called Trust Exercise, written by Susan Choi, and if you've ever been interested in the subject of the unreliable narrator, this is the book for you. It's just such a wild ride, and I think the less you know, the better. But I will tell you that the setup is a bunch of kids going to school in the 80s and studying theater. So if you have a theater background, you have a performance background, anything like that, you'll see a lot of familiar things. But by the end, you will be so unmoored. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Karen accepted this tribute with the extremely dignified, truncated condescension she'd once observed in an actress playing a member of the British royal family in some masterpiece theater thing. Karen's mother had adored masterpiece theater with the slavish adoration of somebody who thinks she's cultured, but in reality is turned on by the clothes. Okay, my 4th recommendation is probably something you've seen a lot on a lot of lists. You may have even read it, or maybe you've watched the TV show. But if you haven't engaged with Normal People by Sally Rooney, I literally beg of you. It's so good. It's romantic and melancholy, and they manage to find each other a bunch of times over the course of like their young adulthood. It's just really... it's lovely, but it's also very sad, and so if that's something that appeals to you, you will love this book. I would say I'm ordinarily a person who prefers like more upbeat stuff, but I just dug right into this and absolutely adored it. it just has this incredible self-awareness of the time period between like the end of high school and the end of college, and how much change occurs and how much you realize about the world. For example, even in memory, she will find this moment unbearably intense. And she's aware of this now while it's happening. She has never believed herself fit to be loved by any person, but now she has a new life, of which this is the first moment. And even after many years have passed, she will still think, yes, that was it. The beginning of my life. Just read this book. The final book on my 5-book list is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I think that a lot of booktube, book talk, etc. like lives in the YA fantasy genre, and this is more considered like new adult. It's a campus novel. It takes place at Yale, and it's incredibly dark and very twisted. If you're looking for something like fun and light and fluffy, I wouldn't really say that any of these books that I've recommended are really in that category. This is the first Leigh Bardugo book that I read. So I read this, and then Shadow and Bone, the TV show, came out, and then I read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, and I've sort of embarked into the Grishaverse. This is fucking fantastic. There's a class angle, and there are ghosts, and the man that she's written is like, are you inside my head? He's so dreamy. So there's also like a little bit of a romance. It's an incredibly clever take on the secret societies at Yale, which you've probably sort of heard about. And like in the back of the book, she gives a bunch of details about people who have been in those secret societies, including her. So she was in one of those things at Yale, and then decided to write this book about what would happen if they were also engaged in like the occult, and what happens when one of the characters can see ghosts. It's so clever and creative, and just like really moves quickly, so it has kind of the YA pacing that I think everyone is really into right now, me included. But it has a little bit more darkness, it's a little bit more intense, certainly for an older audience. So this is really good. If you're a fan of anything she's written, or you like urban fantasy, urban horror, you will like this, I promise. So there you have it, my 5 favorite books of the over 75 that I've had to read for my MFA program. I would love to hear what you guys are reading. If you have recommendations for me, now that you know what I'm kind of into at the moment, maybe you have thought of something that you're like, she needs to read this. Again, like, subscribe, share, and if you're interested, I have a Patreon where you can become a patron and support what I'm doing here and elsewhere on the internet. More links in the description if you're interested in that, and I will see you guys soon.